This evening we are continuing in our study of the book of Job, and we are in the second of our three-part lesson on the speeches of Elihu in Job chapter 32 through chapter 37. You can remember, as we mentioned last week, that I had initially planned to do this in two lessons, but as I was preparing for the first of these three lessons, it became very realistic to me, or very real rather, very quickly, that two lessons was not going to do justice to the scriptures. Three would be much more sufficient, and three may even be pushing it, but we'll do our best anyways. But these speeches of Elihu in Job 32 to 37 are very important. They teach us some incredible and necessary lessons. They help us to see perspective, help us learn much about the wisdom that we have spoken about at the end of Job's three speeches, or three debates rather, with his three friends. And Elihu really shows us some wonderful perspective on God. Last week, we in the introduction kind of to Elihu's speech about, we spoke in Job 32, that introduction to Elihu's speeches, where Elihu explained that he was furious while listening to the three friends debate Job, as well as listening to Job himself. He explained that, while the three friends portrayed themselves as being those who spoke wisdom, in reality, they weren't speaking wisdom at all. They didn't even know how to answer Job. And when speaking to Job, Elihu explained that Job, he had, spoken against God, that he had throughout his speeches towards his friends, throughout the debates, he had spoken ill of God. He had spoken out of injustice, and with a small picture and understanding about the way that God works. And even still, that made Elihu even more angry that, in Job's lack of proper speaking and righteous words, the three friends still did not know how to answer him properly. And in fact, it became a shouting match or an angry match to see who could convict the other one of sin, rather than trying to lead people towards God and faithfulness in their suffering. So Elihu, in his first speech last week, we dealt with in Job chapter 33, Elihu speaks directly to Job and explains that Job was far more focused on defending himself and his own righteousness than on trying to defend God. And that was one of the major issues that we've seen throughout this book of Job. If you missed last week's lesson, we'd ask you to go back and listen to that. Certainly, it's a benefit to you to have a good understanding of that, Job 33. And it really does show us a little bit of a better perspective on, this mindset that we have at times to defend ourselves and our own righteousness, even at the cost of belittling God and the way that He works. Job certainly, it doesn't appear like, he was trying to put God down, but in the process of defending his own righteousness, he inherently had placed accusations on God. And that certainly is an issue. Today, we're going to be in Job 34 and 35, and we'll deal with the second and the third speech of Elihu. In the second speech, we're going to see Elihu be the one who does defend God, which is very important, since Job didn't want to defend God, since the three friends were more worried about, making sure they were seen as wise and had the right answers than they were about making sure that God received His glory. Elihu is going to be the one who decides he's going to speak up and defend God, since no one else will, and explain how God is not affected by men, but rather God always does the right thing. In the third speech of Elihu this evening in Job 35, we'll see that Elihu explains that God's righteousness is unaffected by our decisions. Since in Job 34, Elihu is going to explain that God is not a respecter of persons, then God also is not affected negatively or positively by our decisions, and we do not change or alter God. God is always righteous. He always will be righteous, and we'll see that as we go through these lessons this evening. These are two really important speeches by Elihu here. If you don't know much about God, these two chapters, Job 34 and 35, including next week, by the way, the fourth speech of Elihu, we'll deal with that next week. These are really important to give us a better understanding, a better perspective of ourselves as we look towards God, and as we try to gain a better understanding of God. We'll go through it, we'll get to it, I guess, as we go. So we're going to be in Job chapter 34 and 35 this evening, beginning in Job chapter 34. Make sure I get this up here well. Okay, Job chapter 34, beginning in verse 1, in the beginning of Elihu's second speech, we read this. Elihu further answered and said, "Hear my words, you wise men." So notice now he's not specifically addressing Job. He's addressing the group of them, right? Here, in fact, he's addressing all four of Job alongside of Bildad, Eliphaz, and Zophar. All four of them Elihu is addressing here. So he says, "Hear my words, you wise men. Give ear to me, you who have knowledge." So again, remember how Elihu was the youngest of these that were present, which is why he didn't speak up and why we don't read about him earlier on in the book. He believed that the older men that were supposed to be wise were supposed to be the ones who spoke. But now, notice how Elihu, he kind of addresses, he's insulting them, because these are the older men who should be knowledgeable and wise, and yet Elihu, the younger man, looks at them and says, mockingly, "Well, it's time for you to listen to me, you who have this wonderful knowledge." He says, "For the ear tests words, and as the palate tastes food." So he said, notice what the palate is for what? The tongue, the value of it is to taste the food. If it's good, you enjoy it. If it's bad, you spit it out, right? It's not good for you, right? That's why we know that steaks and Big Macs and things like that are good. We taste them, they're good, and we enjoy them. Avocado and mangoes and fruits and those terrible things, they taste bad, so we spit them out, right? It's a joke based on true events. So he says, as the palate is made to taste food, so also is the ear to test words. So he's asking them to test his words, whether or not he speaks the truth, based on their own knowledge and their own experience, and see if whether or not what he says is righteous or not. Verse 4, he said, "Let us choose justice for ourselves. Let us know among ourselves what is good." Paul said a similar thing, if you remember, in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, when he said that one of our responsibilities as Christians is to test all things and find out that which is good, to hold fast that which is good, and then abstain from those things that are wicked or unrighteous. Elihu is saying the same thing. If he speaks good words, then listen and apply them. If not, then reject them. Verse 5, Job has said, now again, just as in Job 33, Elihu addressed Job's specific words. We have gone through all these, so we're not going to go through them all over again, but we will explain as we go that Job has said many things throughout these three debates between he and his friends. While it may, you never look at Job's words necessarily and think that Job is just a horrible person, but you will if you look at it through a righteous lens rather than a lens of understanding suffering and being empathetic only. If you look at it for whether it's righteous or not, then Job said many things that were outlandish. The friends did as well. Don't get me wrong that, we're not trying to make Job out to be the terrible person, and his three friends were doing great. Elihu's not doing that either. But rather that Elihu's trying to correct and help Job to see what is true, and the friends to adjust the way that they deal with this situation. They should be helping Job by teaching him truth and knowledge, but instead they are they just wanted to fight and accuse Job of being the most wicked man who ever lived. Elihu addresses Job's specific words and uses that as well to teach Job about God to help the situation. He deals with that differently. So Elihu is taking Job's exact words and using them back to him. Elihu now this time in Job 34, he says, Job has said what? What does Job says? I am righteous. God has taken away my justice. Should I lie concerning my right? My wound is incurable, though I am without transgression. Now, what is Job claiming here? And these are, again, Job's exact words. We see these same words of Job when Job explained that he was an innocent man. He's a righteous man. Elihu says Job constantly was saying that he was an innocent man, that he was guiltless. He explained that God was denying him the justice he deserved. He requested that he and God could communicate with a mediator and so they could deal with and repair the situation between them. Constantly Job was explaining his innocence, right? But in the process of that, it sounds fine on the surface for Job to say he's an innocent man, right? But then consequently to that, would that not then, if we're accusing God of being the one who's making Job suffer, and we also say that God is, he makes the wicked suffer for their wickedness, then we say that Job is a righteous, innocent man. Would we not then be saying that God is judging Job unrighteously? And that God, therefore, then is an unjust God? Is that not what we would be saying? And that's what Elihu is trying to explain. He said, Job, you make these accusations against God by defending your own righteousness to this extent. And you're taking away God's justice. And then he explains, he says, what man is like Job, who drinks scorn like water, who goes in company with the workers of iniquity and walks with wicked men? So Elihu is saying, Job, you are not as perfect as you believe you are. I want to point out something here. That, some like to look at Elihu's speech and say that Elihu is saying bad things. Elihu is not saying bad things. In fact, Elihu, if you want to look at anybody in this book and say that they are the hero of the book, Elihu's that one. He's the young man who speaks wisdom that the older men should be speaking. He's the one who understands God better than any of these men who are wise and experienced from years of service with God. Elihu's the one who answers rightly in this. And Elihu he's not trying to say Job is the worst man who's ever lived. What he's saying is, Job, you are not perfect like you think you are. He says, you can claim your innocence all you want to, but Job is not a perfect man. Therefore, to accuse God of injustice would be to say that Job basically sits in the position of God and knows more than God. Is that accurate? Certainly it's not true that Job knows more than God, nor is it righteous to say that God is judging a situation improperly. Job is not perfectly innocent. He has sins worthy of being punished. We all do. Again, Elihu quotes Job by saying that Job has said, it profits a man. Notice the statement of for means because of this. So Job, he's saying, is a wicked man for a reason. Why has Job committed sin? He doesn't, by the way, when we say wicked, it doesn't mean that he's a horrible man worthy of being punished for all eternity. It means Job is a man who is committing sin. He's not doing what he should be doing. And Elihu explains why. Why is Job committing sin? Because Job is saying it profits a man nothing that he should delight in God. Imagine what Job has said. Elihu is quoting Job here once again. Now imagine what Job is saying. In fact, in Job chapter 21, Job explicitly stated this is Job defending himself, and he says in Job 21 verse 15, who is the Almighty that we should serve him, and what profit do we have if we pray to him? Elihu hears those words. I mean, that's a direct quote of Job, is it not? It profits a man nothing that he should delight in God, Job said, quoted by Elihu. Imagine what Job has explained there. What he's saying is that there is no benefit to serving God in this situation. Now, there's a lot of people in our world who have at one time or another felt the same. Putting this into our modern terminology and our modern practice, it would be essentially like saying, we have financial troubles. And so instead of trusting in God, well, God's not going to fix it. So the correct way is to skip worship services and pick up a job that only allows me to work on Sunday morning. To leave God believing that we can fix something instead of trusting in God to help us. That doesn't mean, by the way, we shouldn't work and labor and put in our responsible efforts to care for our physical necessities in life. But to deny God, believing we can solve a situation better than God, what we're essentially saying there is that my real benefit comes from taking care of myself. There is no benefit in serving God. Is that a true statement? That's what Job is claiming here. What delight do I have in serving God? What profit does it have? And this isn't Job saying that it's worthless to serve God. What Job is trying to say is that he is going through great suffering. And as he's going through this tremendous suffering, that he looks at his life and all the trouble he's had to go through, and he thinks, as he served God, what benefit has he gained from all these things? What benefit is he in this moment? What relief is he getting by serving God? He's looking at God almost as a transactional relationship, that he serves God, and that as a result of his service to God, he should receive something. Now, he continues in verse 10. He continues in verse 10 by saying, "Therefore listen to me, you men of understanding. Far be it from God to do wickedness, and from the Almighty to commit iniquity." Now, I love what he's explained here. This is Job, or this is Elihu explaining to Job that, well, Job's going to defend himself. Elihu says, I'm going to defend God then. I'm going to be the one who stands up and defends God if nobody else will. He says, for God, he says, verse 11, repays man according to his work and makes man to find a reward according to his way. He says, surely God will never do wickedly, nor will the Almighty pervert justice. Who gave him charge over the earth, or who appointed him over the whole world? If he should set his heart on it, if he should gather to himself his spirit and his breath, all flesh would perish together, and a man would return to dust. Now, what Elihu has said here, this is very important, is that he says, if you're a man of understanding, then this should make sense. He says, far be it from God to do wickedness. God does not do wicked. If God does something, it's righteous. Now, Elihu is not claiming, by the way, that God is the source of Job's suffering. He's not making that claim. But what he's saying is, if God is or is not making this happen, God is doing righteousness. If God is giving Job punishment, then Job deserves the punishment. If God's not doing the punishment, then he's still doing righteousness. Whatever God does is righteous. I want you to think about this idea. This is the idea we should think about. We don't always know the way that God is working. We don't always understand his decisions. We don't always understand the way that God performs his will. We don't understand God's answer to our prayers always. We just cannot fully ever grasp a perfect understanding of what God does. But we can have perfect trust in the fact that God is always true to his character, and his character is always righteous. That's God's nature. That's why you remember in 1 John chapter 1 in verse 5 that John said, this is the message we've heard from him and declared to you, that God is light and in him is no darkness at all. If we say we have fellowship with him and we walk in darkness, we lie and do not practice the truth. But if we walk in the light as he is in the light, we have fellowship with one another, and the blood of Jesus Christ cleanses us from all sin. Now notice what John has explained here. He says God is light. He's not saying God has light, God does good, God is a good God. What he's saying is God is light. That is his nature. That is what he is. That is the definition of his character. Just like I am a human being, I am a human being. I am a body with a soul. That's what I am. That's what you are. God, just as real to that, is light. And within him is no darkness. There's no shadow of turning. There's no wickedness within him. There's no sin within him. There can be no sin within him because he is absolute good. Which means we don't have to understand all the things that God does, all the decisions that he makes. But we do have confidence, and we must have confidence that God is always true to his character, and his character is always good. Now, notice what he says. We go back to Job chapter 34. Elihu says that God repays man not according to wickedness, but he repays man according to his work. And he gives man a reward according to his way. So he says, surely God will never do wickedly, verse 12. God is God. And sometimes Elihu is explaining, and I believe we need this understanding as well, that God always does good. Keep going. Verse 16, he says, if you have understanding, hear this. I want you to notice how Elihu has constantly been pleading, essentially, that people would listen, that his friends there, that Job would listen. He keeps telling them, hear this. If you have understanding, listen, he says. He's begging them, please listen. And the reason is because this is valuable. This is needed. If nobody wants to defend God, Elihu wants to stand on God's side. And he wants these three brethren and Job to listen and to learn to stand on God's side as he's trying to. Verse 16, if you have understanding, hear this. Listen to the sound of my words. Should one who hates justice govern? Will you condemn him who is most just? Now again, remember that Job explained that he was himself a judge, that he was himself somebody who was judging people who had done wickedness and righteousness himself. So he's saying, if Job is a judge, he punishes the wicked, he rewards the righteous, he sits in the city square and he performs judgments. If that's the case, should he not understand that, if he has done wicked, then in this instance, how can he perform justice? How can he perform judgments? And consequently, can he look at God and not understand that God is the most just, the righteous judge who governs in always perfection? Is it fitting, he says, verse 18, to say to a king, you are worthless, and to nobles, you are wicked? Yet he is not partial to princes, nor does he regard the rich man more than the poor, for they are all the work of his hands. Now, I want to ask this question. I'd ask that you would have this be food for thought for you throughout this week and in this moment as well. We always say that God shows no partiality, as Peter said in Acts chapter 11, that God is not a respecter of persons, Acts 10 and 11, that God is not a respecter of persons. He sees all men equally before him now, that in time past he had his children that were the nation of Israel. Today, both Jew and Gentile alike can serve God equally. It's based on a service under obedience to the gospel in Jesus Christ, not any longer based on your heritage as it was in days long gone. So knowing that is the case, knowing that God is no longer a respecter of persons, God judges a king, a prince, a poor man, a wealthy man, a weak man. He judges them all the same. Why is it the case that God is not a respecter of person and he considers all men equal? Why? Because we don't, do we? We don't, when we look at people, we don't respect people equally. And even if we portray ourselves as being those who respect all men the same, all of us show a form of favoritism at one time or another. We favor our family over a stranger. It's simply the case, even if we try not to, we do. We favor our friends over our enemies. We simply do. We favor our church over other congregations. Understandably so. We favor people. Why does God never favor any man over another man? Why never? Now, I'm not saying, why does God treat most people the same? I'm asking, why does he never favor one person over another? Even when he makes judgments, he doesn't favor another man over another. Why? Well, the answer is here. At least the beginning of the answer is here when he says, they are all the work of his hands, meaning God created all men. It'd be like if you love one child more than another. Can you love one child more than another? Or should you love one child more than another? We shouldn't. We should love our children just the same because that's what they deserve from us, right? But God performs that work perfectly. He's made us all. He loves us all equally because he's given us all life. We are all his people. He's made every one of us. He's created every single one of us. He formed us in the wombs of our mother, as David said. He is the one who formed us, who gave us life. He is our wonderful and great God, which means that he loves me just as much as he loves another. Now, I may be somebody who's in his grace because I've obeyed him. I may receive his mercy, and he may hear me because I am serving him, but that doesn't mean that he loves me more than he loves another person. He's a respecter of us both the same. We both go through the same judgment. We both go through the same good and bad times. He makes the rain fall on the just and on the unjust alike. God is not a respecter of persons. And why is it the case? Well, because he made you and me just the same way, not giving one of us greater favor than another. He made us the same. So knowing that's the case, that means he loves us both the same as well. Well, consider this as well. One reason that we might favor another person over another is because of the benefit in which they give to us. Right? We favor our spouse over other people because our spouse is the love of our life, right? And so because we love them, we favor them. We favor our child over other people's children because, well, that's our child. We have a great love for them, a great care for them. We favor our friends over our enemy because our enemy harms us. Our friends do good to us, right? Or at least should anyways. That transactional relationship causes us to show favor from one over another. But imagine then, what do we do that changes or alters God's perception of us? If we do something that is good, does that benefit God? Can we become valuable towards God? Meaning that we are necessary for God, that we improve upon him. We don't improve on God. He is our great God, whether we serve him or not. If I choose to leave God today, that doesn't make God, of course he misses me as his child, but I don't take away from God because I leave him. I'm the one who loses out because he's extending his grace towards me. I'm the one who leaves it. Now, that hurts him just as it always hurts God if somebody is unfaithful to him. But I'm not more valuable to God than anyone else. God can use another person for his church just like he could use me. And no one is more valuable to him than another. No person is less valuable than another. We are all equal in the sight of our God. There's no bribe that we can give our God to be more favorable to him. There's nothing we can give our God to improve in his life. There's nothing we can give God to make him favor us over another person. And so as a result of that, imagine what Elihu's then saying. If God is the most just judge, then if God is performing his judgment here, could we believe for just a moment then that God might for some reason be performing a wicked judgment? Maybe he's showing favoritism to another person. Maybe he's just mad at Job unrighteously. Maybe Job has done something that just aggravated God, and so he's going to unjustly punish Job. Is that how God works? He doesn't favor anyone over another, he said. He's not partial, Elihu says, to princes, because we are all the work of his hands. Notice he says in verse 20, in a moment they die. In the middle of the night, the people are shaken and pass away. The mighty are taken away without a hand. He says, in a moment, all of us die. We all live and we all die the same. His eyes, verse 21, are on the ways of man. He sees all his steps. This is important now. In verse 21, we're moving forward in this process of judging. Okay, God is a righteous judge. We do not receive a favorable judgment over another person. All of us receive equal judgment, right? And that's true today as well. We go to the judgment day. I'm going to be judged the same as you. We're going to be judged the same way. We're going to be judged according to the standard of the Word of God, the Bible. And so understanding that being the case, we don't need to worry if God's going to judge us unrighteously or more harshly than we deserve. No, He's going to judge us equally. If we do good, we receive good. If we do bad, we receive punishment for eternity. That's simply the way God's judgment works. It's quid pro quo, right? It's what we deserve. Now in verse 21, he's going to explain, does God then, if God judges always righteously, does God make mistakes in judgment? Do we need to bring more evidence? Imagine what Job has said throughout these 3 debates. He's asked God if they could meet together and have a discussion so Job can defend his case. Does God need more information about the case? Look at verse 21. It says, his eyes are on the ways of men. He sees all his steps, all of them, good and bad. There is no darkness nor shadow of death where the workers of iniquity may hide themselves, he said. For he, verse 23, need not further consider a man that he should go before God in judgment. He breaks in pieces mighty men without inquiry. He sets others in their place. Therefore he knows their works. He overthrows them in the night, and they are crushed. He strikes them as wicked men in the open sight of others, because they turned back from him and would not consider any of his ways. So that they cause the cry of the poor to come to him, for he hears the cry of the afflicted. Verse 29. When he gives quietness, who then can make trouble? And when he hides his face, who then can see him? Whether it is against the nation or a man alone, that a hypocrite should not reign, lest the people be ensnared. Now, what he's trying to say here is, God does not need any more information than he already has. He has all the information. He knows every detail of my life, if I've done good or bad. He knows what punishment I deserve. He knows what reward I deserve. And there's nothing I can say that will alter that. He understands my situation better than I know it. So there's nothing I can come before him, which means that's why he says he doesn't need to further consider a man. He doesn't need to cause inquiry. He doesn't need to investigate a crime. He knows. So when he judges, it's righteous. We don't need to understand all the ways that God works. We simply must know that God is always true to his character. And his character is righteous. He is always righteous. We simply must follow him, because when he strikes righteously. When people turn away from him and he judges righteously. When God rewards, he does so righteously. Verse 31, for has anyone said to God, I have borne chastening, I will offend no more. Teach me what I do not see. If I have done iniquity, I will do no more. Imagine what Elihu's saying here is, can anybody look towards God and say, all right, God, you've punished me enough now. All right, God, you've done enough. Time to move on. What kind of arrogance does it cause to look towards God and say how God should judge, and to what extent God should punish? How arrogant are we that we could look towards God and say, we do not deserve this, we do not deserve that, we do deserve this, or we do deserve that. Elihu's looking at Job and saying to Job, Job, you really believe that you can look towards God and tell God that God's punished you enough? Maybe God's not punished you enough, but God's the one who decides. And who are we to stand before him and question him? How arrogant are we to believe that we can question the intentions and the actions of the creator of the universe? Should he, verse 33, repay it according to your terms? Just because you disavow it? You must choose and not I. Therefore speak what you know. Notice he says, defend yourself, Job. Do you have the limitation of your judgment set greater than God? He says, men of understanding say to me, wise men who listen to me. Job speaks without knowledge. His words are without wisdom. Oh, that Job were tried to the utmost, because his answers are like those of the wicked men. Again, we go back to, it's not that Job is the worst man who's ever lived. It's that Job's answers are wicked. Why are his friends not able to answer that? These wise men, supposedly, these great experienced men, how are they not able to answer? Elihu's able to answer. He defends God. He knows God. Why are his friends not able to? For he, Job, adds rebellion to his sin. I like this. Elihu now brings a true accusation against Job. Job's friends had been accusing Job over and over again. Job, you're greedy. Job, you treat people terribly. You're not good. They bring all these false accusations. Now Elihu brings his own accusation. But Elihu's accusation has been proven. Elihu took Job's words and proved Job's wickedness. Job has done wrong. What has he done? He's committed the sin of rebellion because he didn't pay attention and follow God even in his suffering, and he accused God of unjust punishment. Elihu says he adds rebellion to his sin. He claps his hands among us and multiplies his words against God. Against God, Job speaks. What powerful words, in my opinion. This is an amazing chapter about the understanding we need to have about God. I very quickly, I wanted to pull up Romans chapter 11 as food for thought, considering what we just discussed. In verse 33 of Romans 11, Paul said, "Oh, the depth of the riches, both of the wisdom and the knowledge of God. How unsearchable are his judgments, and his ways past finding out, past what we can discover," he says. "For who has known the mind of God, or who has become his counselor, or who has first given to him, and it shall be repaid to him?" Paul says, "For to him, or for of him, and through him, and to him are all things, to whom be glory forever." We, just as Job, need to learn to just let God be God, and for us to be those who follow him. Job 35. The third speech of Elihu is a shorter one, but it's, I believe, very valuable to us in closing today. Beginning in verse 1, Elihu says this, "Moreover, Elihu answered and said, Do you think this is right? Do you say my righteousness is more than God's? For you say, what advantage will it be to you? What profit shall I have more than if I had sinned?" Now again, Elihu looks towards Job's words and brings the accusation against what Job has said. Now, what he's basically said here, what Elihu is accusing Job of saying, and what he's quoting Job of saying, is that Job has said, for what benefit in his life is it for him to not sin now? Meaning, if he does good now, does God reward Job, take away Job's pain? Well, no, God has punished Job, so why would Job not just go and commit terrible sin? If God's already going to bring great punishment on Job, then what benefit would Job have in serving God? It's kind of like Paul in 1 Corinthians 15 when he says, if there's not a resurrection of the dead, if we're not going to stand before God in judgment, well, then eat, drink, and be merry today. Job's saying, if I'm just going to be punished by God, why should I not just go and commit terrible sin? What profit do I have if I have not sinned, he says. Or rather, if Job has done good, what has he gained as a result of it? What kind of arrogance is that again? As if to say that, when he says, my righteousness is more than God's, he's not trying to say that, Job didn't say literally that he's more righteous than God. What he did say, though, is that God will clear his name, as if God needed to, or as if there's no value in Job serving God in this situation. What kind of arrogance, again, has Job stated throughout this book? And Elihu noticed what the friends again did not. Verse 4. Elihu says, I'll answer you, and your companions with you. Notice again, Elihu, he said he was angry in Job 32. You can see, Elihu is angry. He is very angry. I love what he said. He said, I'm going to answer you, Job. You think that there's no profit in you serving God? He says, I'm going to answer you. And your companions, who should be able to answer, right? These wise men should be able to answer. He says, look to the heavens and see, and behold the clouds, they're higher than you. I like how he says, look Let's look together. Look up at the sky. Look at the clouds that are in your air. And I encourage you to do the same thing as well. Look up into your sky and look at those wonderful clouds that are floating so far above your head. My wife and I, this last week or the week before, they had what was called the Planet Parade, where you could see Jupiter and Venus and Mercury all at the same time in the same area. It was really amazing. You could see it with your eye. You didn't need a telescope or any of that. And so we went out and looked at it. It was really quite amazing to be able to see the planets and how far away they are. We're going to have a lesson about that idea at some point, but not for today. But the idea is how far away, how great are the stars in the sky, and the distance beyond the clouds, how much higher are they than us? Verse 6 says, if you sin, what do you accomplish against God? Or if your transgressions are multiplied, what do you do to him? Again, the same idea as we pointed out last chapter. Elihu says, what do you accomplish for God or to God? What benefit does God gain from you? Or what terror does he get as a result of you? If you are righteous, what do you give him? Or what does he receive from your hands? He's just asking a simple question. What benefit are you to God? He asks, the clouds are so high in the sky. How far away is God? How powerful, how beyond is God then that you benefit him? Can you benefit God? He said, verse 8, your wickedness affects a man such as you, and your righteousness a son of man. So he says your decisions affect yourself, and it affects other people, because the multitude, verse 9, of the oppressions they cry out. They cry out for help because of the arm of the Almighty. But no one says, where is God my maker who gives songs in the night? No, oh, I love this. What he's saying is, your actions, they affect people. They harm other people. But do they affect God? No, we read in the scriptures that God gets sorrowful, that God gets angry. But he doesn't get angry or sorrowful for me over the anger or sorrow of another person. If I commit sin, it harms God just as much as if another man commits sin. If I do good for God, it doesn't benefit God any more than another man doing good benefits God. Meaning, if I'm responsible for somebody obeying the gospel, and you are responsible for somebody obeying the gospel, which one of us did better for God? Which one of us is more valuable? We've done the same thing. There's no favoritism for God. If I turn to sin, does it hurt God more if I sin than if you sin? No, it's the same thing. There's nothing I can do for God. But he says, no one says, where is God my maker who gives songs in the night? Verse 11, who teach us more than the beasts of the earth and make us wiser than the birds of heaven. They cry out, but he does not answer because of the pride of evil men. Now, what's he saying here? He said, go back to verse 9. I didn't point out verse 9. He says, because of the multitude of oppressions, they cry out. They cry out for, what have I done? Oh, they cry out, verse 9, for help because of the arm of the Almighty. What does Elihu said? Well, he says that Job, as he looks towards God, he's crying out to God to help him, to relieve his pain and suffering. He's crying out that God would reward him for his righteousness. And Elihu says, what kind of arrogance is it that we cry out to God to save us from our suffering? Do we expect God to listen to us when we turn to him because we're in pain? Imagine just for a moment how often we neglect praying to God when things are good in our life, and then something goes wrong and we immediately bow our heads in prayer. Do we expect God to listen to us now, even though we wouldn't talk to him when things were good? How arrogant are we that we believe we can turn to our Maker, as he said in verse 10, the one who gives songs in the night, the one who helps us and as we suffer, he says. He gives us songs or relief in our moments of suffering, in our night, he says. If God is the reliever of pain, do we only turn to him whenever we're in pain? He says, verse 13, surely God will not listen to empty talk. This is prideful, to believe that God will take care of us whenever we're suffering. God's not a genie who we go and rub the magic lamp and he's going to grant our wishes whenever we see fit. No, he's our God. He says, nor will the Almighty regard it. He pays no attention to those who do not care for him at all times, but only care for him when it's valuable to them. I like this. Remember, Job says, what profit shall I have more than if I had sinned? Elihu says, what are you're worried about what God's going to benefit you? When are you going to start benefiting God, he says, instead of waiting for God to be a benefit for you? God's done enough for you. Does he need to do more for you? Is it God's job to serve us, or is it our job to serve God? He says, verse 14, although you say you do not see him, yet justice is before him, and you must wait for him. Oh, I love that statement. I'm actually going to highlight it in mine. I encourage you to highlight in yours too. I should have highlighted it before. It says, justice stands before God. God is just. And it is you who must wait for him, not him who must wait for you. Does God sit and wait at the door forever while we dance around waiting for the time whenever we need to open it up because he benefits us? It's like calling on those that can give us money only whenever we need them to give us money. Or going to somebody who can help us only whenever we need them to help us, but we don't even shake their hand whenever we see them other times, or reach out to them, or talk with them at any time except for whenever we need them to help us. You must wait for him, not God waiting for you, he says. And now, verse 15, because he has not punished in his anger, nor taken much notice of folly, therefore Job opens his mouth in vain. He multiplies words without knowledge. Again, the idea here is that God doesn't answer empty cries of the prideful. God hears the words and answers the humble, the one who will come to him seeking God's will, not seeking God to be their servant. God is no man's servant. We are his servant. I don't know what's happening in your life today. I don't know what kind of suffering you're going through, trials you may be enduring. I don't know what kind of pain may be happening in your life, but I do know one thing, as we just read a little bit ago, how unsearchable are God's judgments and his ways past finding out in Romans 11, verse 33. God is a great God. And he's waiting for you today. If you're willing to give him your life, he is a great God. He will always be a great God. And he's ready to help you. He's ready to forgive you. Not because you're of great value to him, but because he loves you just like he loves me, just like he loves every man on this earth, every man who has ever lived. And he wants us all to come to repentance. He doesn't favor any man over another. It is us who must favor him. If you're here today and you need to obey the gospel of Jesus Christ, we hope you will. We hope you'll set aside your life, your desires, and give God your life today. If you need to obey that gospel, it's time to hear his word, to believe in Jesus Christ, the Son of God, to repent of the sins in your life, changing your life into an obedient life, to confess before men that you believe Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and to be buried in water, washing away your sins in his precious blood. If you need to obey that gospel, we hope you will today. If you're in our area, call the number at the bottom of your screen if you need to obey that gospel. Or else, if you're outside of our area and you need to obey that gospel, contact your local Church of Christ, and we're confident that they'll help you as best they can. If not, reach out to us and we'll try our best to help you as we have the ability to do so. If you have other prayer needs that are going on in your life at this time, if you have sin that needs to be repented of, we'd ask you, let us know in our live chat, and we'll certainly pray for you today.